This is the Money Loves Women podcast, the podcast that guides women to wealth and an extraordinary life. Here's your host, Dr. Deborah Ekstrom.
Hi, this is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom for the Money Loves Women podcast and for Girl Brain Investing. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that have come up for me as I've been reading, some of it within the last few years and a lot of it lately. So the first book I want to show you that I read, in case you want to read it too, is Second Chance by Robert Kiyosaki from the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series. And it's basically second chance for your money, your life, and our world. Some very salient topics in there, and we're going to talk about those just a minute. The next really uplifting book I read was How Civil Wars Start, and basically how to stop them. How civil wars start and how to stop them, or what's needed to stop them. And this one is by Barbara F. Walter. The next wonderful book I read is The End of the World is Just the Beginning. Peter Zeihan wrote this book. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but The End of the World is Just the Beginning. And he talks about the factors that are coming down the road and what effects they'll have on the world and therefore on our economy, on our lifestyle. And so you can make some plans. The next book I read, and I could not have read this if I hadn't read those books first because it just seemed too dry to me, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And then I read those books, and then I read Ray Dalio's book. And his book is The Changing World Order. Oh, got it upside down. This one. No, I do not have it upside down. The Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, and talks about the success and failure of nations. And Ray Dalio is one among many people that looks at cycles. And he is possibly one of the most successful international investors that exists on the face of the planet. And thanks to Ray, we have a really wonderful dissertation here about world order and why nations fail, and he's looked at up to 4,000 years ago. The Chinese have records back to 4,000 years. So he looks at the same cycles happening over and over. And last book, this one is by Mustafa Suleiman. It's called The Coming Wave. And this book talks about the effects and possible effects that artificial intelligence will have on our country and our world. And perhaps the greatest risk, greatest dilemma that we've ever seen. So let's talk about these a little bit. First of all, let's talk about Robert Kiyosaki. And Robert has been a financial educator for many, many years. And he basically tells us that our big threats to our wealth and our well-being are a few different things. The first one being environmental emergencies, and we've seen some evidence of that, and the economic havoc that wreaks upon us. Environmental emergencies. The next one he talks about is nuclear emergencies. Thankfully, we've not seen that aside from accidents. The earthquake in Japan and the Chernobyl meltdown, two such examples of nuclear emergencies. But I think he's speaking more of nuclear war or nuclear sabotage. And then he talks about military emergencies. And I think that beyond military emergencies, we need to be more worried about militant emergencies. And we hear a lot about that in how civil wars start and what a civil war might look like in the United States, given the right circumstances, which seem to be coalescing. The next thing he talks about, Robert Kiyosaki, is pandemic-type emergencies. He wrote this book before the COVID-19 pandemic. And right now we have in excess of 600,000 different disease entities that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is monitoring. So think about how those viruses might leap to humans being in close contact and how that might affect us. And then he talks about economic emergencies, and we certainly need to be concerned with our national debt being in excess of 130% of our gross national product, our gross domestic product, GDP. So economic emergencies, including excess debt and how vulnerable that makes us, particularly when foreign countries own our national debt. So we are indebted to them. And I looked today to see we pay just as much. Well, we pay $1 trillion, in excess of $1 trillion a year for Medicare and Medicaid, in excess of $1 trillion for Social Security to keep our elderly and our vulnerable safe and cared for. And when you think about that, our military spending is about 2/3 of that, so less than either one of those. And our debt is equal to one of those. So just paying interest on the debt, which puts a severe constriction on what other things we can spend on in our country. So be thinking about that. Economic emergencies. So right now we're reserve currency. The United States is the reserve currency that other countries trade in. However, as your currency becomes worth less and less with printing by the government, which has happened a lot in the last decade or so, called quantitative easing. It's a lovely, lovely name for printing money, for counterfeiting more money and putting that into the money supply. And that is I would call it a sneaky form of taxes. So anybody who's spending more for anything that they're buying, which is all of us, you've had your taxes raised. That's because the government printed money. Now, during the pandemic emergency, I can see where that makes some sense to keep the economy afloat. There's a lot of it that doesn't make sense. The last thing that Robert did not pay any attention to, because it wasn't on the horizon, was artificial intelligence. And the risks of artificial intelligence in addition to the rapid replacement of workers or the obsolescence of workers, businesses and whole industries, is ready access to the negative use of AI in the population with societal harm, as well as independent, unconstrained, untrained machine thinking. And if you think of the way that elephants have been poached, and the younger male elephants, as they become adolescents, have no discipline, no restraint, and they tear things apart. That's just elephants. And imagine what human beings can do. And we've seen the hacking increases. We've seen all kinds of misdeeds in general, but using artificial intelligence, these can be magnified. So even if you don't use artificial intelligence, don't have a business that you even need it for, aren't in school, you should learn about artificial intelligence and learn how it's used so that you can prevent your child from getting access to Boston Robotics and a small computer and hijacking a attack helicopter, because that's doable. And I am going to have training for artificial intelligence available. We'll put a link on this podcast so that you can purchase access to that. It's really inexpensive and it's incredibly powerful. So if you have a business or any area in your life where you think artificial intelligence might help you, or you just want to find out more about it because your kids are going to be using it, your grandkids, then you can have a look at that. So back to Robert Kiyosaki: environmental emergencies, nuclear emergencies, military or militia types of emergencies, pandemic emergencies, and economic emergencies. Obviously, we care about the economic emergencies very strongly. And then artificial intelligence, which Robert was not putting on his list because it didn't exist yet. Or maybe it existed and just wasn't where it is now. Wasn't on the forefront. So just keep those in mind. So that second chance, Robert Kiyosaki talks about that. Basically, he says we've got a second chance if you want to leap in now and make plans for the things that are coming, which it behooves all of us to do, or if you're willing to step forward and help influence those outcomes and see if we can mitigate some of that risk. Check out Robert Kiyosaki's book. Some of the other authors talk about looming declines, including education decline. And we saw that just in the pandemic. But on top of that, when empires fail or nations fail, what we see is educational decline. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the rise and the fall of the cycles that go on within that. Pandemic, we talked about already, as a looming risk, as well as global climate change and financial risks with the rising sovereign debt and the debt of countries. And we don't want to forget about not just quantitative easing, where the Fed is printing money and putting it into the money supply to stimulate the economy. Good short term, really bad long term. But banks, don't forget, lend more money than they have. And we saw Silicon Valley Bank fail just from a suggestion that one of their officers put out, that there was not sufficient funds to back up anyone's requests. So if you think you can go to the bank at any time you want and have everybody else do the same and get all their money back, sorry, that's not true. They lend out 10 times more than they actually have in reserves. We'd like to see more reserves. I think that's a very good idea. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation has some reserves, and their backup is the Treasury. And we know where the Treasury's at, in the red. So just be very clear about what's going on there. AI, of course, one of the looming risks mentioned by another author. And we see that all of these things are interwoven. So climate change results in migration of populations to move, for example, to higher ground. And we see pests coming in with loss of food sources. We see unpredictable weather affecting agriculture and many, many other things. So all of these things are financially interwoven. And when it affects wealth, and the wealth gap gets bigger and bigger, it affects our society unrest. And that's already happening. So we need to be very concerned about this. And these are issues that need our utmost concern. So anyone who is stepping up to take care of that, good. I think we have a failure of fiscal accountability of our elected officials, and our political system reinforces that. So when people are in office for short periods of time, they tend to have a short view. And they're looking for what they need to do, what giveaways they need to do for the population. And the population is greedy in order to get reelected and get back into their positions of power. So just keep that in mind when you're voting. You might want to be interested in their long view, not their short view. I also think that part of the basis for some of this downturn is the lack of relationship skills that we are taught. And we see everything from lack of parenting skills to abusive practices in corporations. And it's not a good thing. So this dynamic where all of these threats are going on leads to a very small percentage of the population gaining and controlling an exceptionally large percentage of the wealth and power. And this happens in the top stage. So let's go back a little bit into cycles. So in the first cycles, this happens after catastrophe in government. And government gets reformed in a new order. Hopefully you have responsible and visionary leaders who then put systems in place for good governance. We see a return to higher productivity and an increased work ethic. And with productivity, we see things leading to more wealth. And at first, the wealth is well distributed. But then in turn, over time, we see a small percentage of the population gaining and controlling exceptionally large percentages of that wealth. And then they become overextended, not as productive, and more interested in pursuits of luxury and excess. And this is just human nature and happens over and over and over in empires and civilizations and nations. This leads to conflicts, and it produces revolution, violent or peaceful, and or civil war. And when we go to war with ourselves, we become vulnerable to external threats, particularly if we are the great power in the world. There's 3 cycles within this. There's the long-term debt and capital market cycle. There's the internal order disorder cycle. And there's the external order and disorder cycle. And this is what the coalescence and disintegration of empires has in common. It happens the same way every time. So embedded in these swings are the ingredients that lead to swings in the opposite direction. So none of this is everlasting and permanent. None of it. And if you start to look around you, you can decide for yourself what area of the cycles we're in, because I think we're in the downturn. We're not yet to extreme civil disorder, but there are increasing numbers of disenchanted, disengaged, and very angry groups. And we've seen some of that in recent years, and there's way more than you believe there are. So when we see the next civil war, it won't look like the last one. The next one, according to Barbara Walters from How Civil Wars Start, the next one will look like militias, gangs that appear and disappear, and basically domestic terrorists. So I think we're at way more risk for domestic terrorism than we are for someone else attacking us. At the same time, the United States has created and enforced this new world order that we've seen the last 70 years or so, the last 80 years or so. And I've lived through that. I was lucky enough to be born right after World War II. And I was lucky enough to have experienced these wonderful, peaceful years of growth and peaking in the United States. However, now we need to decide if we can prepare ourselves for the coming decline. And is it inevitable? No, it's not. But it takes wise and actionable planning and execution to keep us from that. Of these things, though, artificial intelligence and the risks and benefits that it endows upon us has never before been seen. And the truth is, there's more we don't know about the future than what we do know. More that we don't know than what we do know. So what's a person to do? I think that what's smart is to enjoy the day, enjoy what you have, live in the present, but plan for the future. So think about those things that are threats and decide how you might manage them. Imagine what might come about and imagine how you might manage them. So we have an aging population. I think our financial outlays are going to exceed what our young people can put up for us, and we may need to be satisfied with less. We may need to decide on a more simple lifestyle, less lavish lifestyle. And I see in some of our young people that they're much more interested in experiences and relationship than they are in material possessions, and I think that is a very good thing. At the same time, I see young people whose parents have not been helicopter parents, but they've been lawnmower parents, mowing every blade of grass that might brush against them. And on occasion, I see them as very fragile. So we're seeing things on our college campuses where they feel unsafe. They've been highly protected. I can tell you a story where I had a young woman, significantly overweight, who came to my office about surgery. She could not step on the scale because she could not see the number. She could not hear the medical word obese. She could not hear the term BMI, which stands for body mass index. Apparently, that's in the common language now. And she could not hear any of these things. Her fragility was astounding. And patients like this need to be handled with great care and gentleness. But I see it increasingly in the population, particularly among young people. And it becomes a great challenge. And I'm not sure how they will function as adults and parents and in the workforce, which is going to be a necessary part of their adulthood. So how this will work, I don't know. Hopefully we have enough who are on track and not fragile, that we can make everything work. So position yourself, and I'm interested in you positioning yourself, particularly financially, but because finance is also interwoven with all of these other challenges, you need to make assessments in those other areas to see where you stand. So where do you stand in terms of your vulnerability to environmental catastrophe? Where do you stand in terms of artificial intelligence taking your job or making your job be obsolete? Are you resilient? Do you have many skills? If you don't, are there skills you could have? In fact, it's very interesting to me that it wouldn't be that hard to educate yourself in artificial intelligence with expertise in that area where you could assist others. And I think there will be jobs. I hope there's not so many jobs that go away that there's not more created. We'll wait and see. I'm hopeful. Where do you stand in terms of protecting yourself from violence, from violent breakdown of society? Where do you stand in that regard? How is your own financial house? Is it in order? And if it's not, what can you do to get it in order? You need to focus on that. If you, in fact, have good cash flow, have you learned to invest wisely? There, in the face of chaos comes many and downturns comes many opportunities. So if you're ready for that, in terms of buying large publicly traded growing companies, wonderful companies, they will go on sale. And you want to buy them for maximum benefit when they go on sale, as long as their intrinsic value is still intact. And I looked for a long time for training on this until I found Rule 1 Investing with Phil Town. And I recommend that if you like this sort of thing, or you just feel like you want to have control of your retirement account or your excess cash flow in a brokerage account, and investing and trading is your preferred area of investment, then by all means go and get yourself educated. And you can learn short-term trading using rules so you keep the emotion out of it. And you can learn, and that's about probability, and you can learn long-term investing, and that's about certainty. And that's because you've done your homework. So Phil Town will teach you how to do that. His group will teach you how to do that. It's really challenging for me to learn it because I'm just not very good with my computer skills. I'm old. But for the average young person, incredible opportunity in this way. And then don't forget about other investing techniques and learn one deeply. Real estate, a great area. You can be a small but mighty real estate investor. If you want to try that one, look up the book of the same name. I talked about it on a previous podcast. But the small and mighty real estate investor, I think it's just a fantastic way as long as you choose well and you make sure you know what you're doing. So get educated on real estate investing. Find everything you can, read, learn, and become a real estate investor. It's a wonderful area for creating wealth. It takes consistency and good decision-making and some mistakes. No matter where you go with your investing, you're going to make some mistakes. And there'll just be some things that don't go well. But and then don't forget about business acquisition. If you already know how to run a business, you can think about acquiring a business that you can do on the side. If you've got cash flow, you can bring you can bring the money to the table and have someone who has skills but no money run your business. Or you can do it the other way around. If you have skills, but don't have a lot of cash on hand, find somebody who wants to invest their cash and grow a business. You can do the work, and they can be the people who foot the bill up front for purchase of the business. And I've done this, and I really love this concept. There's a training called the Acquisition Lab that's run by owned by Walker Dybell. And you can look that up. I also took that, and I think it's a great, great resource. If you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you already know a bit about business. You've either been working in a business at a high level or you have had a business. And if you want to acquire a business where you don't have to have so many business skills, think about franchise and research franchises. And you can even use your retirement for a franchise, but use it obviously well. So you can grow your retirement at the same time you create cash flow for yourself. So there's another opportunity in the business acquisition space. You can start your own business. It's tough. It's difficult to do. Usually, you have to work hard at the beginning. And if you listen to my podcast from Stephen Chow, he teaches people how to do online businesses because his wife wanted to quit her job. And he has mywifequitherjob.com. If you want to look into doing that, he can teach you how to do it. Great, great guy, Stanford educated, very smart, and does a lot of things after they've been sort of asked of him. He's followed the pathways after he did his own business and was quite successful, and then taught other people how to do it. He has podcasts just so he can meet interesting people and so forth. So you can go back and listen to Stephen Chow's podcast on that and get involved with him if you want to. I also interviewed a gentleman about tax deed investing, two different people, one early in our podcast. And the most recent one, he has a course that's very effective that you can take. Tax deed investing is a very interesting area of wealth building and investing, but you have to learn it. You have to learn it. You have to follow the rules. So follow what Tony tells you in his course. Go back to the podcast I did with him. Something I really love about Tony, he screwed up in college, went home, got a sort of minimum wage job. His dad said you have to be employed. He learned from his dad that the only reason you're unemployed is because you choose to be. So there you go. But he eventually worked for someone who was in the real estate investing space and became interested in tax deed investing and basically pretty much wrote the book on this one. So if you get involved with Tony, you've got great teaching and great backing. Those are pretty much the major areas where you can invest. So if you've got cash flow or if you don't have any excess cash flow, try to find a way to create some. Either cut your expenses or increase your income or both. And find the cash to be able to invest. So that's it. I want you to position yourself for what's coming in case we have bad times. And I want you to think about how you can get more power, influence, and money into your hands so that you can influence the outcomes of what's happening now. At the very least, you can be in a position to know what's needed for the next cycle. So I really encourage you to do that. Money loves women. And I hope you love money too, because it wants you to love it so it can love you back. So put that into perspective. Yes, there can be some challenging times coming. Position yourself so you can ride the wave. This is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom for the Money Loves Women podcast and for Girl Brain Investing. To your health, to your wealth, and to your happiness. May blessings rain down upon you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Money Loves Women podcast. Please leave us a rating and review so we know how we can improve. Visit moneyloveswomen.com to gain more insight into how to live an extraordinary life.